A reading from Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 8. When the entire nation had finished crossing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Select 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, and command them. Take 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood. Carry them over with you and lay them down in the place where you camp tonight." Then Joshua summoned the 12 men from the Israelites, whom he had appointed, one from each tribe. Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, one for each of the tribes of the Israelites, so that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, 'What do those stones mean to you?' then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off in front of the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the Israelites a memorial forever." The Israelites did as Joshua commanded. They took up 12 stones out of the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord told Joshua, carried them over with them to the place where they camped, and laid them down there. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Good morning, church. So glad that you all came today because you wanted so badly to hear me preach. I know that's the only reason you're here, right? Oh, it's a delight to see some of you we haven't seen for a while. We're glad that you're here for this special day. This summer, we are making our way on our journey with God, exploring these moments and these seasons that we encounter in this life with God and with one another. I can't believe how fast the summer is going already, but we still have a few weeks left of walking that journey. Lay down the candle things for me. Can you lay them down on the floor? They're going clank, clank, clank. So we've still got a few weeks to talk about this journey, and today we're talking about crossing the threshold. So here is a threshold moment in my life. There it is. Aw, you did just what I wanted you to do. This is Brad and me. It was 14 years ago this past May, just after we were all loaded into the car after our wedding reception, ready to zoom off into the sunset. When I was thinking about this moment and this threshold for us the other day, I asked Brad, did you carry me across a threshold on our wedding day or any day? And he replied, I think that my back would remember it. Oh, that guy, I swear. Lovely. Romance, that's right, Howard. True love. The truth is, most of our lives are full of mundane moments, moments that pass by mostly unnoticed. Events that don't stand out, appointments that really don't make much of an impression. But then there are those key moments, those threshold moments. These are the moments in which the importance, the weight of the moment is obvious, and perhaps its holiness is too, but not always. Often it's something that you've waited for, a wedding, a graduation, a retirement, a court decision, a vote. Last week we talked about the people of Israel in the wilderness, in that space between the promise and the fulfillment, between the promise of freedom that came when they escaped from Egypt and then the fulfillment of that promise in the promised land. So today we fast forward to that fulfillment, to that moment. We hear that expression, crossing the Jordan, lots of times, right? But this is the story of God's people literally crossing the Jordan River. After some 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, they are finally about to step onto this new ground, the ground of God's promise. But here, finally, they can feel it, they can touch it. It's the thing that is holding them up. And what better way to finish this to finish what was begun in Exodus than to have the people once again cross the sea, or this time a river. The actual crossing of the river occurs a chapter before what we read this morning. This time you don't have Moses or Joshua striking his staff into the river to part the waters. Instead, you have the priests. They carry the ark into the Ark of the Covenant. It contains the very presence of God. They carry it into the river, and it says that the waters flowing from above, from upriver, they stood still, that they rose up into a single heap upriver, while everything below kept on flowing, and it emptied out space for God's people to walk through. The threshold moment for Israel is a gift. This moment ties them to this larger story, connecting them to the people who had crossed the sea 2 generations before as they escaped from Egypt. This moment reveals to them the power of this God that they are carrying around with them. This God who, on the one hand, cannot be contained, and yet, on the other hand, has chosen to pack God's self into a suitcase, basically, in order to be on the journey with them. It is God who takes a river that at this time, at this season, is overflowing its banks, and who transforms that river into a passageway, into a threshold. I can't help but think how much this threshold crossing for Israel is like so many of the thresholds that we ourselves cross in our journey of faith. It's a bold stepping into something new, and because it's new, it's unknown, it's dangerous. It's, like we said, a first day of school or a first day of a new job. It's a move in or it's a move out. It's retirement. It's selling your house for the very last time and moving into assisted living. Whatever it is, the other side of it is unknown and often scary. After the people had crossed the river into that unknown space, Joshua had one person from each tribe take a stone from the middle of the riverbed, a stone that could have only been retrieved by walking across the bottom of the river, by journeying in that particular place, across that particular threshold. So one stone was taken for each of the 12 tribes so that they could remember, and one day they could tell their children and their children's children and generations to come just what God had made possible. Because here's the thing. This wasn't the last threshold that they would cross. This wasn't the last step in their journey. This is exactly why they were asked to take 12 stones from the riverbed, so that they would remember that the God who makes a way through the river would continue to make a way for them, before them, as they enter this new and unknown and dangerous land. They would need the memory of this God and the threshold that God had led them across in the coming months and the coming years as they faced what would be battles, as they laid claim to land that they knew was theirs but that they had to fight for. Those stones would take them back to the threshold, back to the river bottom, and help them remember. I can't help but think this morning about the families who have crossed a river into this new unknown land of promise called the United States, and have found that it too is a land of danger for them. And as I think of them and pray for them as they hide today from ICE raids that are going on even now, so many of their days, I wonder how I or how we could be living stones to them, reminders that the God who brought them to this crossing will also see them through the toughest days in this new land. I wonder, what is the threshold before you? Or one that perhaps you have recently crossed? Do you feel that challenge of the unknown before you? Do you find yourself relieved to be emerging out of the wilderness? Or are you more fearful of what's ahead in the next season? The promised land, what it really holds, whether that promise is really good. Can you see where God has already accompanied you and perhaps how God has even made a threshold possible, a way to cross where there was only a river before? We too are at a threshold moment, First Church, as we gather this afternoon to vote on our own practice of marriage equality in this place. It's a holy moment where we remember and give thanks for how far God has brought us, and we have the possibility to step through into a new way of being, a new leg of the journey. The crossing of this threshold does not fundamentally change who we are. We simply move into a space where we can be even more free to boldly proclaim the message of God's love. What is ahead of us is unknown, and maybe it will be scary. But this is why God gives us the threshold moment and the stones to remember it. So we approach this and every other threshold as a gift, filled with possibility, to know the fullness of freedom in the love of this God, so that when we cross over, we are ready to boldly take on the new season, the new place, the new challenge to which we are called by God, by this God who was once carried across the threshold of the Jordan River and who now carries us across each and every threshold of our lives. Thanks be to God. Amen.